Here we go. Because you demanded it. Undertaker and Kane from Ultimate Edition WWE Mattel Series 11, I believe. At the end of my last video review, which was The Rock and John Cena from the previous wave, people let me know that they'd be interested in seeing these when I got them. So I just picked these up from Heroes Hideout about two and a half hours ago. And just settling in, and we're going to take a look at them, see what we think. Before we even get too far, I already know there's some pretty well-known issues with these figures. So when we get to them, we'll talk about them. So rest assured, we'll get there. All right, here we go. Add a package. Everything's ready. We're going to talk about these. I'm going to do the same kind of thing that I did with The Rock and John Cena, where I'm going to put time codes right here, and that'll get you to whichever figure you're more interested in. You can check it out if you don't want to watch the whole thing. So starting right off with the Undertaker, you got a twist at the neck. You got decent range up, a little bit of down as well. Tilt side to side there. Pretty good. So moving to the shoulders here, he does have butterfly joints on the inside, which is great. Up about 90 degrees. You can also spin it the whole way around. This shoulder piece does hinder that a little bit, but not really too much. Bicep swivel right there. You have a double jointed elbow, which I thought was going to be hindered by this elbow pad, but it's not, so that's great. You have a hinge, a twist at the wrist, which works pretty good. You do get some side-to-side tilt action at the diaphragm, along with a ab crunch. I'll move the arm out of the way, where you'll be able to get about that far forward at the ab crunch and that far back. So as I zoom out, you're going to see between the neck and the ab crunch and everything working in tandem, you'll get them to move that far back and about that far forward, just using the abs and not getting into the hips or anything. So not too bad. Twist at the waist, so he can swivel right there. Ball joints inside the hips, so you'll be able to get out about that far, forward about that far, and back not very far at all because of the plastic on the back of the figure. You also have cuts at the thighs, so they can swivel up here, along with a double jointed knee, which works really well. Then you got a swivel at the top of the boot. You have a hinge at the ankle and a hinge at the toe joint, and you also have a rocker at the ankle to be able to widen his stance to whatever you desire. So overall, ultimate articulation works pretty well with these, as I've discussed in the past, and I'm very happy that Mattel has decided to step up the articulation on the premium figure line. So, with that all said, with that all out of the way, let's get going here in the detail. So as I mentioned before, there are some pre-existing critiques of these figures that people had from the earliest reviews and samples that people have seen and gotten themselves. So I'm going to try and address whether or not I think those are fair. With the Undertaker, people were saying that the head sculpts weren't exactly the greatest. Is that a fair critique? Now that I have this in person, I think yes, but maybe not for the initial reasons that people might have thought. This head sculpt that's on him out of box is actually pretty nice. I think this is pretty spot on. Early promo shots had this looking not quite right. People joked that he looked more like Michael Jackson than The Undertaker. In person, I don't really see that, and hopefully on video that translates. However, the issue with this head sculpt is that you can really only use this with the entrance gear. You'll see that there is no hair in the back, and it's all pushed to the front. Now, like I said, with the cloak thing on, the hair in the back, you won't even see it, so it won't matter. But I kind of wish they just packed this head sculpt in with a different hair mold to be able to use it when you're not displaying the figure in his entrance gear. So here's the second alternate head, where he's got his tongue out and his eyes rolled back in his head. Would have been fine without the tongue. He didn't start doing the tongue thing until after he was already the American Badass and came back as the dead zombie Undertaker. So yeah, this head, I mean, it's not a terrible head sculpt, but it's just anachronistic. Like, this doesn't fit this era of Undertaker. Again, would have much rather seen a more straight-faced Undertaker like this first head with hair kind of like this, maybe even with the eyes rolled up. That would have been cool too, but this is what we got. And lastly, the third head we got, which is a very kind of just straightforward expression. Again, kind of based on more of a current look for Undertaker, but I mean, he basically still looked kind of like this in the Attitude Era anyway, from when this figure is meant to represent, which would have been like 97, 98. Is it perfect? I don't think it's perfect. I think, again, the hair being slicked all the way back is kind of what ruins this head sculpt in some ways for me. If he had like the strands of hair hanging in the front, like, you know, honestly, if they combined this hair sculpt with like this, you might have been pretty bang on. But unfortunately, you have honestly three pretty good head sculpts, just none of them really accurately nail what I was looking for from this figure, unfortunately. That said, I do believe this that's on the figure right now is probably the best catch-all head sculpt for the Undertaker that we get for this pack. Like I said, the first one was great for the entrance gear. This one I'll probably literally never use, so I think my figure is probably going to be rocking this head sculpt. So moving on to this upper body thing, that was another criticism of this figure, was that the upper body seemed a little bit too wide. And I could definitely see that criticism from the promo pictures. I will say in person it's less noticeable, but I mean it's still kind of there. I'm going to go ahead and assume that the reason for that is because of the rubber overlay that's over top of the figure's chest. It's hard to do overlays like that without it appearing really bulky on a figure this small. So while I do appreciate that they try to do it, they might have just been better off molding an upper torso instead of having like this overlay thing on it. I'm not sure if this overlay can come off. Like, let's take a look. Yeah, I think it's actually glued, so I'm not going to try and mess with it and peel it off or anything like that. That said, even though it's a little on the bulkier side, the detail is nice. I'm going to see if I can get in there a little bit better, but you can see that the patchwork, he's got like the studded designs. The shoulder pad appears to be like a separate piece from like the front of the vest. He's got like these cross designs on there. It is really nicely done. It's just maybe a little large, but like I said, that's just kind of down to the fact that it's a small scale figure and you're trying to put like rubber overlays on it. Like, trust me, this could look a lot worse. We've seen a lot worse rubber overlay figures. The lower torso has these details all sculpted into, which are really nice. They're raised up. You got decent detail right there. Actually, pretty nice detail right there on the buckles and little cross straps and the things that he has there. And that same detail is applied all the way down the sides of his legs. Those buckles and straps and everything that he has, which are nicely done. I gotta hand it to him. Now, something else I wanted to point out is that I was afraid of these arm sleeves that they've used for previous Undertaker figures. Now, typically, these elbow pads that they put in are made of like kind of a more firm, like rubbery plastic. Like, it's hard to get any kind of like bend in the arm when they use these because they're so rigid and stiff that it's hard to like actually like move the joint. I'm pleased to say that these are like a much softer rubber. So you can actually bend the joint with very little issue, and I'm happy about that. The only thing I question is whether or not this will start to like wear at the rubber over time. I will say I do prefer this to like the super thick kind of rigid arm sleeves that we've gotten with Undertaker figures before. So that's really cool. I'm a big fan of that. So we got some boot detail down here too. You'll notice these are not the lace-up boots that we've seen with a lot of different figures before. These are kind of the more traditional style, no lace, just flat front boots. So this is kind of honestly what I always remember Undertaker wearing back then. I believe the Jakks Classic Deluxe set had boots like these. But besides figures from like that era, I think Mattel mostly uses the laced up boots for Undertaker, which I've always kind of found odd. But they've corrected the oversight here, and I think that actually looks much nicer, so I'm happy about that. Last, I want to draw the attention to the gloves. Now these are more of like the MMA Ken Shamrock Goldberg style gloves than the traditional Undertaker, just kind of like black leather gloves. Now he would eventually start wearing these later in his career, but for this time period it's not accurate. However, I am not somebody who's going to be too bothered by that. I've seen people complain about that the gloves are inaccurate. I mean, Mattel has sculpted accurate gloves for Undertaker before, so I'm kind of confused why they didn't use them, but the fact that they didn't, it doesn't really bother me. So I'm okay with this. I'm 100% fine with this, honestly. So, not an issue for me, but just in case you're somebody who doesn't know about that, now you're aware. So for his accessories, he comes with extra hands. These are like the wide open, kind of like gripping hands. They're good for like choke slam poses or, you know, maybe his entrance or whatever you want to do with them. But we've seen these on Undertaker before. We know what these look like. And then he comes with another pair of hands, one of them open and the other in a kind of like thumbs up pose. It's meant to replicate when he would do his taunt at the end of a match, like he's going to tombstone the guy, do the throat slit and bring his arms across like that. And while I do appreciate that they packed in these unique hands, the overlay thing here tends to get in the way of that, but you can kind of see that it's hard for the arms to hold themselves in that position because it's got something in front of it. What's in front of it? Piece of rubber. Also, putting him in that pose and seeing this head sculpt again just makes me wish like this should have been like gritted teeth or something, not the tongue. Like, yeah, oh well. And here's the final accessory he comes with, which is his entrance robe. And this is a pretty big selling point for this figure, I gotta say. In hand, I was able to put this on pretty easily because, as I mentioned in the last video, these shoulders, you can just pop them out and pop them back on, as well as like you can just pop the head on afterwards. Now I've actually got the head just kind of like resting on the peg. I didn't push it all the way down because, for me personally, I think it looks a little too sunken down if you push it all the way down the peg. So I kind of leave it up a little bit, and I think that looks good. It doesn't look like his neck is like too short or anything. The detail on this entrance gear is really, really nice. So a little better detail on that. You can see all like the studs and the buckles and the straps and everything are individually sculpted, painted. They look really nice. The shoulder pieces are really, really well done. The back really pops. I think they did an excellent job with the sculpt on this, and you do get like a cloth cape, and the cloth is actually like a pretty heavy fabric. It's not like a flimsier fabric that we've seen before. This is yeah, it's pretty thick, pretty heavy duty. And as I mentioned before, this head sculpt, when you get the entrance gear on, looks really, really good. Like the missing hair in the back, the fact that there is none in the back, it's all pushed forward, all that kind of stuff. It really is not an issue with this thing. It looks, yeah, honestly, this looks really, really nice. So here's how he stacks up next to other Undertaker figures from over the years. Now these are all 90s Undertaker figures. Obviously he'd probably look just as good with like early to mid 2000s like American Badass stuff, or like more modern recent Undertaker figures. But I just went with the ones that would have kind of been bookending this era. So that I believe is like one of the WrestleMania Heritage Elites. That's the Survivor Series 96 Defining Moments. I think I painted the hands on that one. That's the WrestleMania 15 Defining Moments, which is a re-release of the San Diego Comic-Con. And that is the Target Hall of Champions one, I believe. I think that's what it is. I don't know. If I'm wrong, you've already written it in the comments. Now, real quick, this is what I was talking about before. This is the Ministry Undertaker that we just showed. And you can see here, this is a better glove mold for this time of Undertaker's career than the one we got with the MMA kind of style padded gloves. These are just straightforward, like leather gloves, fingerless. And I think that these would have looked better ultimately. Just what I was referring to before. Again, this doesn't bother me, but it bothers some people. So if you're one of those people, go find one of these Ministry Undertaker figures and knock yourself out. So here's the Elite figure that I made for my JWF show. This is the Network Spotlight Undertaker, which came with like a Ministry robe and a different head sculpt. And this head sculpt, I believe, is from the SummerSlam 98 Undertaker basic figure. But yeah, looking at them side by side now, I mean, this was good for its time, but I mean, we got a new contender here. So much so, I wish I had this when I was filming Undertaker versus Sting. I think it would have just looked nicer. That said, this served its purpose in my collection. I'm still happy to have it, and, you know, it's captured its legacy on my animations and all that kind of stuff. So again, you know, thankful for the time I got to spend with this Undertaker figure, but I think I prefer this one overall. And something I was curious about trying. This is actually Defining Moments Survivor Series 96 Undertaker head on the Ultimate Edition body. I did have to modify that. You can see there's some plastic that I had to cut from around the inside of the head that will allow it to pop down on the peg a little easier, so that way it's interchangeable and you can just pop it on and off rather than having to boil it every time, unless you want to do that. I don't know, you might like that. I don't know your life. But I actually had an extra one of these heads from a figure that my man Bash sent me some time ago. I have my version of this, and then I have the version that I painted at Collision because he got color from The Rock. You may remember that, you know, that classic showdown if you're old. So I did actually have a spare one of these heads that I was like, you know what? Let me see if I can make that work. And honestly, this might be the move here. It's a little more era appropriate. You do get some details that you don't get from other figures, like the teardrop there. It's not a straight black hair, it's more of a brownish, which I think contrasts well against the gear. Undertaker would let his hair kind of like lighten and fade a little bit in those days, so I think that also is accurate. Like I said, yeah, like you have to modify the inside of the head to be able to fit on the peg, but this really is not bad at all. Like, I might really like this. Yeah, I mean, this is an older head sculpt, and it's on a figure that I believe only got one release, so you're never going to see this head sculpt used very often again. But that said, if you have one, it might be worth trying. Like I said, you will lose the True Effects face paint, face print technology that they do, which honestly is pretty hit and miss sometimes. But I got lucky. Most of my Undertaker figures out of the box here were well done, but like I said, I just think I like this head sculpt better. I might just rock this. Alright, so now moving on to the big Red Machine Kane. This is like a classic debut Kane from 97. You know, he debuted at Bad Blood. Everybody kind of remembers the classic moment. He comes out, tears the door off of the Hell in a Cell, tombstones the Undertaker, and that's like, you know, something that's never been done before. It's a big deal. Here comes Kane. He's huge. He's mean. He's whatever. I think this figure does a pretty good job of capturing that Kane. These Ultimate figures, as you saw when I did my Undertaker comparisons, they're a little bit stockier than the Elite figures. At least these guys are, which I think works in their favor because these are meant to be like huge guys. And I think the Elite Kane, as good of a figure as it was, it suffered from being maybe a little bit too slim. That's not to say that this figure doesn't suffer though. Let's get right into it. So as been pointed out by many other people, this arm is actually cast in flesh tone plastic and then painted red, which ordinarily you might think, oh, what's so bad about that? Well, the fact that they didn't bother to paint inside the joint. So now you have Kane ripping his sleeve there every time he bends his elbow, which is just god-awful. Like, why did anybody approve that? How did that get out of QC? How did this happen? Now, all the complaints have already been made, so I'm not going to belabor the point. Since all that backlash and all that complaining, though, Mattel has said that they are going to come out and basically anybody who bought this Kane figure is going to be able to get a replacement arm without that issue, and I believe replacement heads, too. I'm not so sure what's specifically wrong with the heads. I can't spot it with the naked eye. Either way, class move. I was glad they did that because, honestly, like, this, realistically, to have to, like, paint that would have been, I mean, an easy enough fix, but like, why? You know, it's a $33 or $35 figure depending on where you get it. You shouldn't have to be doing that. So I think I'm done complaining about that since it's going to be fixed eventually. Let's move on. So here's the first head sculpt that comes on him out of package. I believe this is the same Kane head sculpt we've seen previously on earlier releases of Kane. And I think it's a pretty good head sculpt. You got the hair kind of like hanging in his face, looking ominous. You have the chin strap underneath and the goatee, which are painted nicely. Obviously, you got some detail in there with like the mouth and the nose and everything peeking through. And the way they blacked out around the eyes to really make the pupils show, I think that's well done. Pretty cool. I noticed that the neck, when you take the head off, is not actually painted, and I'm not sure if that's an oversight or if Kane just wore like a neck piece that went all the way up, basically to like right beneath his chin. So I don't know. We'll find out, I guess. So as you move down to the chest, you'll see there's a line that goes like across here that divides like this black part up here from the flame decal designs. Now, this has happened on previous Kane figures. It's not really as noticeable when it's in black. There was like the inverted color scheme one that it was like a lot more noticeable, I think. But that's not so bad, honestly. You do get sculpted detail for the, I don't know if you'd call that a sleeve, but basically the opening in his arm there. And that sculpted detail extends down to the belt as well here. So you get this side piece of his costume here where it's like stitched up. There's like raised studs and little like threads and fabric and stuff that's holding that together. That's pretty cool. Unfortunately, it doesn't extend down the leg. It's done the same way as the earlier Elite figure was, where it's just painted on. Now it's painted nicely. It's straight. I got nice line work there. I don't have anything wrong with it. But for an Ultimate figure, I think it would have been better if it had been sculpted on. And the belt is a separate piece. It's like a rubbery plastic. So it is pliable. You can move it around so that way when you're posing your figure, it's not going to get in the way. If you got it like up high, you can do it like that. Doesn't matter. Do whatever you want, but it'll move for you. And lastly, you got the raised studded wrist guards too, and he has them on both arms. So that's nice. And I'll mention the boots again too. He has the same boots as the Undertaker, which is something that I always really didn't like about earlier Kane Elites. He always had like the laced up boots. These are much more reminiscent of the ones Kane wore in my mind, so I'm happy to see this. So as far as what he comes with a second alternate head, which is actually really, really nice. I like how it looks like his hair is like all the way pushed back. Like Kane frequently in the ring would do this thing where he just like would hold his head down and then just like flick his hair all the way back. And this kind of looks like it just followed up right after that pose. So yeah, I really like this head sculpt. I think they did a good job. He also comes with his voice changer voice box, which we haven't seen this since maybe the first classic Kane Elite. I'm not sure if it came with like any of the reissues, but man, it's a cool accessory. I've never used this with my Kane, although Batman used this to control the Batmobile in Batman vs. Terminator. So yeah, fun bit of figure prop history for any stop motion animation historians. which I don't believe there are any in existence. For extra hands, there's not much to speak of here with Kane. He does have these two wide open gestural hands. Now these work for like his entrance pose where he's like lifting his arms up over his head and setting off the pyro and stuff. These are really well done. They look awesome on the figure, so I think if you're gonna give Kane extra hands, these are probably the best ones to use. So that's really cool. And another use for these wide open hands is him getting ready to choke slam somebody. Yeah, this actually looks awesome. I like this. And he's got the WWE/WWF championship that he held for a grand total of like one night, I believe. So yeah, it's cool that they included this with him though. It's never bad to get more belts. Now here's where this just gets kind of stupid. He comes with this cape. What is this cape, I hear you ask? Well, apparently at a few house shows, like right around the time of Kane's debut, he wore a big dumb cape to the ring. I don't get it. Like, I mean, it's fine that he did that, you know, they're still developing the character and everything. What I don't understand is why they chose to include this with the Ultimate Edition figure. You know, like this is meant to be like your definitive mind's eye version of that classic Kane. The point I'm trying to make is literally nobody remembers this cape from any episode of Monday Night Raw or any pay-per-view because you just didn't wear it. Like, I mean, it's a nice enough accessory. It's got Velcro in the front, so if you want to like fold it over his shoulders and, you know, Velcro it shut, you can do that. I just popped the head off and dropped it down over and potted it back on. It works. Like I said, perfectly serviceable accessory, but like, what are you going to do with this? I mean, I guess you can put them back in the tag team with the Hurricane and like use them like as superheroes in your federation. I don't know. But yeah, to me, this is probably going to get thrown in a bag and never used. So here's the Ultimate Kane in between some of the other Kanes that I have in my collection, most from around the same era. This is the first Elite flashback Kane, and this is the one that I've used in my animations a bunch, and I think you'll see what I mean when I say he's looking a little bit slimmer than the Ultimate Edition one. I think the Ultimate Edition one's bulk is just, makes him a little bit more imposing. Something I noticed also on closer examination is the head sculpt on this mask is like, I think it's brand new, because the masks on these Kanes are totally different. Anyway, this is the basic, was it like Heritage series maybe? I don't remember specifically. This is the ringside Undertaker disguised as Kane that just came with an extra Kane head, so, you know, if you didn't have this figure, you could just use this one. Cool figure, although the head sculpt that is on him right now isn't really the one that you're meant to use with it, so they kind of skipped out on some of the details, like his beard isn't painted. There's really not much going on paint-wise, so I'm glad that that has an interchangeable head so that you can probably use the Ultimate Edition heads with that if you want to go for like a long sleeve Kane Elite. And then lastly, this is one of the earlier Elite Kanes that they made. I don't know what series this is. This is, yeah, pretty early in the Mattel Elite run though, from what I gather. But yeah, as you can see, he stacks up pretty well with all these. They look pretty uniform together, and I do like it. I will say, I think this red compared to this red is a little duller, not quite as bright. Might just be my camera / old eyes playing tricks on me. But yeah, overall, really cool. So just out of curiosity, I tried to put the Ultimate Edition head on that ringside exclusive disguised Undertaker body, and it sits a little too high on the peg, so it doesn't quite look that good. Just wanted to point out that the fists from the Undertaker disguised as Kane ringside set fit on the Ultimate figure too, so if you want a Kane that has closed fists, you can use those hands from that figure on this one and it'll look good. So here you got the boys together. They look pretty good together, I will say. I think they made Kane slightly shorter than the Undertaker, or that might just depend on which head you have on the body. It looks like at the shoulder they stand about even, so it might just be down to whichever head sculpt you put on. But yeah, overall they do look good together. You could stand them back to back, you could have them fighting each other, you could have them being the Brothers of Destruction, all that good stuff, whatever you want to do. So here they are with the previous Ultimate Wave that we talked about in the last video. I'll put a little link up here so you can watch that if you missed it. Overall, I think the Ultimate line has maintained a pretty good quality since the inception of the line. Again, not perfect, but I think Mattel has shown over the past, 2 years or whatever it is that the Ultimate line has been out, that they are improving the product, or at least trying, or moving in different directions where they're taking a few risks and just trying new things. And here they are with a couple Ultimate figures that are more appropriate of the era that these two are based on. You got Shawn Michaels on this side and Stone Cold Steve Austin on this side. Similar to like what I did with that other head for the Undertaker, I did that with the Shawn Michaels, so I just have a better option, I think. But yeah, these all look really good together, and if you're looking for an Attitude Era display, or just, you like putting your Ultimates all together, you certainly have some different things you can do. And here you see them with other 97 era WWE figures that you may have in your collection. Some different elites, some different basics. I think all the figures from this era generally look pretty good together. You can see some of the sculpts that they used years ago maybe show some signs of looking a little dated, maybe. I don't know. But overall, I like how these look. I think they look really cool together, honestly. So here they are with some other figures from other companies making wrestling figures that are pretty compatible with Mattel stuff. You got Jushin Thunder Liger from Storm Collectibles, you got Kenny Omega from AEW from Jazzwares, and you've got Kazuchika Okada from Super 7 Ultimates. And you can see the synergy here is pretty good. Like, all these figure lines scale pretty well together. So if you're just somebody that likes to cherry pick and pick, you know, your favorite wrestlers, doesn't matter what company makes them, I think, you know, if you want this Undertaker and Kane, no matter what other line you collect, they're going to look pretty good there. So, yeah, have at it. And yep, I just checked the time. I thought so. So if I were to rank these figures overall, I think I was more pleasantly surprised with Undertaker than I planned on being. And Kane is not a bad figure by any stretch. In fact, he's a great figure. And he'll only be improved when Mattel gets around to like sending out those replacement arms and head sculpts. Like I said, I didn't really think anything was wrong with the head sculpts, but maybe I'm missing some details or something. I don't know. Maybe I just don't care. But yeah, that one thing with Kane's arm is kind of a bummer, but you know, as I mentioned, they're fixing it, so pretty much just gotta wait. Undertaker though, like, the more I messed with it, the more I found myself liking it. He's not quite as bulky in person as I thought he was gonna be from the promo pictures. It just seems like they did a better job with it execution-wise than they did photography-wise. The only real bummer about Undertaker is those head sculpts. And like I said, they're not bad head sculpts. They just don't really fit the era very well. So, like I said, I found a workaround. I'm going to use that Defining Moments 96 Undertaker head sculpt probably for this figure. But, you know, you'll find whatever solution works best for you. Now, with all that said, with all the minor nitpicks aside, I don't think this wave is as strong as the Rock and John Cena wave that we just got a little while ago. And I also don't know that it really lived up to the hype of these two figures when they were first announced. I'm not going to say they're bad, and I do think that since having them in hand, they've both kind of like grown on me in some ways. So basically, when these figures were announced, everybody immediately like had 10 out of 10 figures on the mind, and they thought they were going to be the most amazing things ever. And then the prototype pictures didn't quite blow people away. And then there's like the minor little QC thing with the arm and the Undertaker heads and all that kind of stuff that kind of soured people a lot. I will say though, like, you know, knowing that going into it, I wasn't quite as excited for these figures, but they won me back around, especially now that I know that we're getting another arm for Kane and I can use a different head for the Undertaker. So yeah, overall I would say definitely with those caveats in mind, grab these figures. They're worth it. They're fun. They look good on a shelf. They mix with all your other figures as you've seen. So yeah, with that said, my name is Captain McKay. Thank you for watching, and hopefully I'll have a new like Between the Frames or something up in the next couple of weeks. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a like, leave a comment, do all that kind of stuff, and I'll catch you in the next one later on.